Good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us. Here is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start from Mali. The three main armed movements that make up the coordination of Azawad movement merged on Wednesday in Kidal, northeastern Malian town they have controlled militarily since 2013. The group includes National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, the Arab Movement of Azawad, and High Council for the Unity of Azawad. In concrete terms, the new leadership of the ex-rebels in the north are expecting to mount more pressure to the Malian government. A few months ago, the members of the new alliance suspended their participation in the decision-making bodies of the Algiers peace agreement, accusing the Malian state of backing out of the agreement. The coordination of the Azawad movements, a predominantly Tuareg alliance that fought the state for years before signing the peace deal in Algiers in 2015, blamed the ruling military junta for foot dragging. The new movement is already planning, with other armed groups involved in the peace process, to launch a vast operation to secure the populations in northern Mali. We head over to Mauritania now, and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov met with his Mauritanian counterpart Merzoug and President Ghazouani, and he visited Mauritania on Wednesday, holding talks with his colleagues. As I have said, the two sides discussed bilateral cooperation across a wide range of areas, as well as regional and international issues. Mauritania isn't interested in supplies of hydrocarbon fuel, food and fertilizer from Russia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Wednesday at a press conference after talks with Mauritania's Foreign Minister Mohamed Ould Merzoug. And then it is the first visit of the Russian Foreign Minister to Mauritania during the 60 years of diplomatic relations. Lavrov later arrived in Sudan on Wednesday evening. And we head over to Angola. President João Manuel Lourenço and the First Lady Ana Afonso Diaz have welcomed the King of Spain, Felipe VI, and his wife to Luanda for a 3-day visit. On Tuesday, the Angolan head of state said there is a need to draw up a new framework of strategic priorities between Angola and Spain aimed to boost partnerships and benefits from bilateral relationship. President Lourenço was speaking at an award ceremony of the highest Angolan distinction, the Agostinho Neto Order, given to the visiting King Felipe VI of Spain and Queen Letizia Ortiz. For his part, the King of Spain underlined the negotiating skills of the Angolan president in the management of the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The 3-day visit of King Felipe VI to Luanda served as a framework for the signing of 3 agreements between the government of both countries. Spain has more than 60 companies operating in Angola in different sectors, but cooperation between the two countries has intensified more in the business sector. And a high court in Mali has rejected a bid by the government to uphold the suspension of head of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, Martha Chizuma. Ms. Chizuma was interdicted on grounds that she was facing criminal charges whereby she is accused of defaming some high-ranking government officials. The alleged defamatory remarks are contained in a secretly recorded private conversation that she had with a person not employed by her office. In the recording, she purportedly accused some top officials in government and codes of frustrating the fight against corruption. The recording was made and circulated widely online last year, with Malawi President Lazarus Chakwera saying at the time that he had reprimanded Ms. Chizuma for the remarks. The president, however, said he would not sack her because he considered the recording and its circulation to be corruption fighting back. The secretary to the president and cabinet, Colin Zamba, nonetheless interdicted Ms. Chizuma last week, but the directive was set aside by the court on Monday following an application by the Malawi Law Society. On Tuesday, the government filed an urgent application to suspend the order that stopped Ms. Chizuma's interdiction, which the court has now rejected. Earlier on Wednesday, the US and the UK, two of Malawi's main donors, expressed deep concern with the government's action, which they said undermined the credibility of the country's fight against corruption. Ms. Chizuma is seen as a committed anti-corruption leader. And we head over to Algeria. The country has recalled its ambassador to France for consultations, the presidency said on Wednesday in a news spat over the evacuation of Algerian activist Amira Bourou, who is wanted by Algiers. President Abdelmajid Tebboune ordered Ambassador Said Moussi to be recalled with immediate effect, a statement said. Mr. Bourou, 46, was arrested in Tunisia on Friday and risked being deported to Algeria, but she was finally able to board a flight to France on Monday evening, the AFP news agency reported. The French-Algerian was sentenced in Algeria in May 2021 to 2 years in jail for offending Islam and for insulting the president. She has not been placed under arrest since then, pending an appeal. French President Emmanuel Macron visited Algeria in August 2022 to repair fractured relations after a long period of tension over conflicting memories of Algeria's bloody war of independence. Another story that perhaps we should cover here in depth. And then we move over to Eritrea. Human Rights Watch say the authorities in Eritrea are punishing the relatives of people accused of evading forced military conscription. The campaign group says it has spoken to parents who were evicted from their homes and an 80-year-old man who was detained for failing to hand over his youngest son. There are other cases where people were forced to sleep on the streets. Eritrea has a policy of indefinite national service, which is often cited as a reason why thousands of young Eritreans try to flee to Europe. Roundups by the military intensified as a result of Eritreans' recent involvement in the civil war in the neighboring Ethiopia. And a Chinese-owned private security firm has been closed in Mozambique's port city of Beira for alleged involvement in money laundering. The Attorney General's office accuses the owner of the Panda Security, Ghazouani, of defrauding the state of about $13 million through tax evasion. Another of his firm, the Thian High Patrol Station, was closed by the authorities 2 months ago, also an allegation of money laundering. The PGR also suspects him of financing terrorism, forging documents, conspiracy and environmental crimes. Mr. Gie has not commented on the allegations in response to the latest closure. More than 3,000 of Panda security workers demonstrated, demanding 2 months of back pay. It is unlikely they will receive their money as the employer's current whereabouts are unknown. But a PGR spokesperson told journalists that he will be found. The administration of justice is gathering evidence to hold him, his associates and all those who contributed to his various crimes will be brought to account. Head over to the Democratic Republic of Congo and the latest. The authorities in the country say the number of people killed from the latest protest against the United Nations peacekeepers has risen to 8, with 28 others injured. The military governor of North Kivu province said the peacekeepers fired in self-defense when protesters attacked their convoys as it was returning to the city of Goma on Tuesday evening. Several United Nations trucks were set on fire and looted. Over the last year, there has been several protests against the UN peacekeeping mission, which is widely criticized for failing to stop rebel attacks in eastern DRC. Last July, more than 30 people were killed during such protests. And still staying with matters UN, but this time we move over to Tigray. The UN says it has helped about 50,000 people return to their home area in northern Ethiopia's war-hit region of Tigray 3 months after a peace deal was signed. Around 2 million people were forced to flee their homes during the 2-year conflict. The war created a humanitarian emergency, and one academic study last year estimated total civilian deaths caused by fighting, starvation and lack of health care stood at between 385,000 to 600,000. The head of the UN Refugee Agency, Felipe, made the announcement at the end of a 3-day visit to Ethiopia. He said everyone he had met in Tigray's capital, Mekelle, wanted to go back home, but this will be easier to achieve in some areas than others. We go to Zambia, and President Hakainde Hichilema has commuted the death sentences of 390 prisoners to life imprisonment. The announcement follows Mr. Hichilema's decision last December to abolish the death penalty. Home Affairs Minister Chuck Muimbu told a media briefing that following the amendment of the penal code, no court could now impose the death penalty. But the law could not be applied retrospectively, so some prisoners still face the death penalty unless pardoned by the president. The national broadcaster quoted him as saying, "It is not known how many people remain on death row." Human rights campaigners have hailed Mr. Hichilema for his decision to scrape at the death penalty. The last execution carried out in the southern African nation was in 1997. And from South Sudan, President Salva Kiir asked the new senior presidential advisor on special programs, Dr. Benjamin Paul Melchol, to improve South Sudan relationship with Kenya and the region. Dr. Ball, a businessman and the head of the ARC construction company, was appointed in December 2022 by the president as his special envoy on special programs. Kiir tasked him with strengthening bilateral relations between South Sudan and its neighbors, especially Kenya. On the same day, Kiir presided over the swearing ceremony of two ambassadors, Dr. James Okuk and Aker Ndeng Majok, whom he appointed in December 2021. Okuk, a former political analyst and a lecturer at the University of Juba, vowed to strengthen the country's international relations after taking oath of office on Wednesday. We go back to DRC, and soldiers marched in the eastern city of Goma. An AFP journalist said in a bid to reassure locals unsettled at perceived inaction against the M23 rebels. The march comes a day after those violent clashes against the East African Community Military Force, which deployed late last year to pacify the turbulent region. There is mounting frustration among some Congolese people over what they view as unwillingness of the EAC troops to fight the M23, which has seized large territory in North Kivu province and come within miles of its capital, Goma. The Congolese troops marched through the city of over 1 million people on Tuesday, where shops remained closed after protesters blockaded streets and looted businesses the previous day. Colonel Gulume Jike, a military spokesperson, told reporters that the aim was to reassure the population that the army was there and prepared for any eventuality. M23 rebels re-emerged from dormancy in late 2021, claiming that the Democratic Republic of Congo had ignored a pledge to integrate them into the army, and that sparked this renewed war. And we go to Somalia, and matters also that are worrying, because now the UN is appealing for $2.6 billion this year to assist the 7.6 million of the most vulnerable Somalis who are facing acute hunger and possible famine from conflict, high food prices, and unprecedented drought. Adam Abdelmoula, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, in a video briefing with reporters, said the famine is a strong possibility from April to June this year, and of course beyond, if humanitarian assistance is not sustained and if the April to June rains underperform as currently forecast. Abdelmoula said nearly 6.4 million people are currently facing high levels of food insecurity, and that is expected to rise to 8.3 million between April and June, including 727,000 of them who are expected to experience catastrophic hunger levels. That's not very good news there. And then we end with Ethiopia. The authorities in Ethiopia have banned parallel rallies by supporters of the Orthodox Church, and those backing a breakaway group that were planned to be held in capital Addis Ababa. In a statement, the Security and Intelligence Task Force said no permission were issued for the rallies and warned citizens to keep off the venues. The Orthodox Church is the country's largest religious denomination, its highest decision-making body. The Synod has called for the rally in Addis Ababa main square to protest against alleged government support to a breakaway clergy. The breakaway group also announced it will also hold rallies on the same day. The breakaway clergy accused the church of maintaining a system of linguistic and cultural hegemony in which congregations in Oromia are not served with their native languages. The church denies these accusations, and the Security Task Force blamed unnamed foreign enemies and domestic forces of exacerbating the problem. And you are now up to date with the latest news from across the continent. So now even the churches are holding rallies there that I think they have in Ethiopia. The undertones there are quite heavily political, if you think about it. Yeah, so I think I'll just gloss over that story this afternoon. I think we've talked about it here several times, so I will not dwell so much on that story. Well, there's something else I wanted us to talk about. Kiir sending a senior presidential advisor on special programs, Dr. Benjamin Paul, to improve South Sudan's relations with Kenya and the region. But he specifically tasked him to really make sure that South Sudan and its neighbors, especially Kenya, had a good, bilateral relations. I think we've not heard problems, Kenya and South Sudan. Kenya has been very, very instrumental as far as the country of South Sudan is concerned by bringing peace. In fact, Kenya was very instrumental with even South Sudan becoming a country. And for a long time, the leadership lived, even some of, in fact, majority of those leaders, top leadership in South Sudan, I'm told, allegedly, some of them, even have homes, still have homes here in Nairobi and I guess other parts of Kenya. So South Sudan and Kenya, we've been very close. There's not been any problems that now, so because when I was reading this, I wondered, do we have a problem now? I don't think so. And if there has been any kind of misunderstanding, we've always found a way to solve it. So I think I don't know why he would insist, but I guess it's for the best, for the good of these two countries. And this is what the president said: our relations are tarnished around the world as you take up your new assignment. Go and normalize our relations with Kenya, especially the recent tension along the border corridor. Okay, I do understand some parts of that, but it wasn't these tensions along the border, it wasn't to the detriment that now it requires very, very special attention, But if President Kiir finds it important and underscores that, then I guess it will be nice if these two countries coexisted in peace. But him saying that the relationship of the country has been tarnished around the world, President Salva Kiir, why do you think that is the case? Why do you think the relationship of South Sudan has been tarnished with the rest of the world? You have to, the leaders of South Sudan, you've made the Pope, who is not in the best of conditions as far as his health is concerned, leave whatever it is and his rest and his recuperation and travel all the way to DRC and then to South Sudan, because the leaders there, you have refused to do the right thing. So if that is what you mean by your relationship has been tarnished around the world, then it doesn't matter what you do in terms of sending these envoys. We don't have a problem really, but if you really want to engage in a cleanup exercise and a public relations exercise and a relationship and an exercise that will really see that South Sudan gains or has a good name around the world, because you're worried about the country's name being tarnished, then I think the best way to fix that is for the leadership of South Sudan to do the right thing. I think the rest of the world is just, to some extent, tired because they're feeling, the stakeholders, from what I've been seeing and from the attitude that sometimes is being exhibited, they're feeling we can't keep pushing you towards a peace that you are not keen in having. So at some point we'll just push, but you must want that peace, and you must feel that you need that peace, and you must feel that that peace is important for you and your country, and then it will be easier for the rest of everybody else to come and support. But if the rest of the world and the stakeholders are feeling they are the ones that have to keep pushing for this peace, for this stability in South Sudan. And then once they leave, then the rest of you are engaging in this unnecessary squabbles. And some of you are supporting these communal wars and this ethnically undertoned conflict that you've seen now ravaging one part of the country. And there are some credible reports that are saying even some of these conflicts are being sponsored by some key people in government. How do you expect to have a good name in the international system? Explain to me. So by you sending your envoy and, you know, telling them to go and make sure that they repair this and they strengthen this bilateral relationship between South Sudan and the different countries and Kenya and all that, that is well and good. And we all should be like that, I believe. And every country is striving to just have peace and good relations with the other, because, as I have explained here, the world has been structured. The world has been structured in a way that we thrive on cooperation and we thrive on interdependency. So we can't live without each other. South Sudan can't live without Kenya, and Kenya, well, we also need South Sudan in some areas. And so if we are able to be at peace and enjoy a harmonious relationship even within our borders, then it is good for us. It is good for the greater region of East Africa, and indeed Africa, and the rest of the world indeed. So if you're worried about South Sudan having a bad name, and you're out here sending your envoys to go and fix that and to normalize relationships, that is great, but that will not solve it. That will not absolve you from the responsibility and what you need to do to ensure that you gain that kind of respect and that kind of honor from the international community. Because when they're sitting there and they're looking at you, you know, and all these things that are happening there, and a leadership that seems to be out of touch with the priorities that its people is supposed to be, how they're supposed to be serving its people. You know, they wonder what kind of people are these? You spend so many years fighting to get your country, and then through the struggles and blood and sweat of the people of South Sudan, you get that. And after you've been given that, now you start fighting within yourselves. So since you got independence in 2011, 2013 the war broke, South Sudan has not been stable yet. I'm sure there are even people who at this point could be thinking we were better off when we were just one Sudan. Maybe we were more peaceful, or the security was guaranteed, you know, except for that long war that was being fought for South Sudan to gain its independence. But the people of South Sudan have really nothing to be proud about other than the fact that they now have a country. But in them having a country and the things that they were hoping to accrue from having their own country, they've not been able to enjoy that. So stop getting worried about the name of your country has been tarnished around the world, while you have had that happen. You and the rest of the leadership in South Sudan, it's not just you who is responsible. All of that political elite up there, all of you are responsible for where South Sudan is and for this name that now you want, sanctified. You have all tarnished the name of South Sudan by how you act and how you carry out your matters there. Okay, so you fix that. Yeah, as much as you want to send this envoys to fix and the tarnished name of South Sudan, charity begins at home. Once you're able to do the right things in South Sudan, and you're able to have a proper way of engaging with each other, automatically, you know, we will see that progress is being made, and then implement the things that you're supposed to be implementing. And then you will not have to worry about anybody tarnishing the good name of South Sudan. Okay, that will just rectify itself. So just do the right thing. You and the rest of the leaders in South Sudan, just do the right thing. Okay, so the UN is saying it has been able to return about 50,000 people to their homes in the Tigray region. I guess that is a wonderful thing. And there has been some effort, even by the government itself of Ethiopia, to try to settle down, because obviously the UN is not working by itself. It has to work in conjunction with the government of Ethiopia. So there has been these efforts that are being put forth. And yesterday, I think I was reading to you a news by the spokesperson of TPLF, Getachew Reda, and he was saying that the Eritrean forces are still in parts of Tigray, and so they are, because they're really raising some level of anxiety. So they're feeling, if we had agreed and we've met part of our deal and you're trying to do right by all the agreement that we've had, they don't understand why Eritrean forces are still present in that region. So maybe they could be, maybe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed could have a better reason why these forces are still there in Tigray. This is an issue that has been raised. The other week I was telling you about this United States a senior official who had also reiterated this much, and he said no, these forces are still there and it is a worry, and because it's causing a bit of jitters in the Tigray region. So why Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed still feels it's necessary for him to have these forces there, I don't know. But I love that, you know, people have started being returned to their homes, so that is a good thing. And the fighting is said to have caused a lot of course, civilian deaths, like we said, and starvation and lack of health care. And the deaths now, according to the United Nations, they're placing the deaths at between 385,000 to 600,000. So we can't be having all these figures being floated here. So a lot of people died. Anyway, the head of the UN refugee agency, Felipe, made the announcement at the end of his 3-day visit to Ethiopia. So he said everyone he had met in Tigray's capital, Mekelle, wanted to go back home. And you know, that region had been blockaded. The Ethiopian government was not even allowing any external body or international body or even the media to access. So even now, I think the media's access to that area is a bit limited, maybe after they've rebuilt it or wherever, because it was really, really destroyed. So perhaps it will be open to the rest of the world. But there has been some changes and some things taking place in line with the agreement that was done in November in South Africa, and then later on, of course, the mediation process was carried out in Kenya to conclude part of that, you know, the mediation. And I think that is moving on well. And speaking of Eritrea, you know, Eritrea, there are countries in the world. Let me look for that story. There are countries in the world where serving in the military or military training is a must, but usually they put a cap, like in what do you call it, in Israel, you do 2 years. And they are also, like in South Korea also, you're supposed to, it's a must, you have to go serve in the military or train in the military, but serve at least for 2 years. And if you don't, then you have to go serve a jail term for a certain amount of time. So you're given that option because it is mandatory from a certain age. You have to go serve. So Eritrea has its own version of this service, but the way it is doing it, it's completely different from how we know it in the countries that do this mandatory military service. So in Eritrean, the military draft, they're saying, according to Human Rights Watch, they're saying for the people who refused, remember there's a time, especially during the heightened conflict in Ethiopia, where Eritrea was participating in support of the Ethiopian forces, the young people were being forced at a certain age, both men and women were being forced to join the forces by force. And for those who refused or ran away, their relatives were being punished by the government. And so they're being punished. Others were made to sleep outside. Others, like the story I was reading of this an 8-year-old man who was detained for failing to hand over his youngest son. How are you detaining an 8-year-old man? Have you lost your mind? President Isaias Afwerki. I know you were meeting with were you meeting with my president? I think you were. But it's very interesting. And then this service, like I've said, in some countries, like the duration, the number of years you were to serve or you were to go for this training is very clear. Usually it's just about 2 years or thereabout. But for Eritrea, you're not even told how long you're supposed to stay there. So I guess you're supposed to stay there until, I guess, I don't know, they decide to let you go. So you're supposed to serve there as long as, it is indefinite. The national service is indefinite. That is the policy, which is often cited as a reason why thousands of young Eritreans flee to Europe. So when you see all those young people sometimes who die in the Mediterranean, from the East African countries, it's hard. It's hard to find a Ugandan there. It's hard to find a Kenyan there. It's hard to find a Burundian there. It's really hard to find a Rwandese there or a Tanzanian there. Usually they're youths from Ethiopia, parts of Ethiopia. Now, probably the Tigray region or something. But majority of them are from Eritrea. And because Eritrea is a very closed country, and Eritrea is President Isaias Afwerki is a totalitarian, ruler there. So because of how it is, so a lot of young people usually decide to run away, and a majority of them from this part of the world are the ones you'll find that when deaths are being reported in the Mediterranean, you'll find a good number of Eritrean young people there in those unfortunate accidents that happen in the Mediterranean. And because they ran away, Eritrea, I doubt if they even have like international media. Even their internet, where their internet services are today, I think is where Kenya was maybe 10 years ago. And if you want to even take a flight from outside Eritrea, and you are at a certain age, they have to quiz you. You have to go through a whole, because the government wants to know why are you leaving the country. So they don't allow a certain age of group of people to leave the country. But when you're older, I guess, they allow you can take a flight easily. But if you're a certain age, a more younger person or a youth, you'll not be allowed to leave Eritrea that easily because a lot of these young people go and they don't come back. But from these such policies, why would anyone want to do that? And now the world has become a very small community. So as much as you want to control everything, because his social media there and internet is really highly controlled, but still people still find ways of getting information and they get enlightened. So you can't keep holding people forever, hoping that they don't know what's happening. So yeah, so if these young people, anybody refused, or their young men and women refused to join this forced policy of the national service, which is indefinite, then their families were being punished, and that is according to the Human Rights Watch there in Eritrea. Okay, there's a story here I've read, but I will not talk about it right now. And this is the east of Algeria recalling its envoy to France in a new spat. Now, Algeria and France is just one of the latest of such countries that has fallen out with its former colony, but I'll not get into the details of that. So let me not even just get into that story. We'll talk about it more, God willing, tomorrow in the morning show. What other story did I want us to talk about? Well, we've seen the Russian foreign minister really visiting countries. He was in Mali the other day. I think he's in Mauritania today, and I think he will be visiting another country. So, Russia is just trying to mend, or rather strengthen, its diplomatic relations, especially here in the continent. And he was meeting with the Mauritanian foreign minister and also the president, Mohamed Ould Ghazouani. And this is what Lavrov said, that our friends are interested in supplies of hydrocarbon fuel, foodstuffs and fertilizer from Russia. We spoke about this in detail today, and we are ready to satisfy requests for these goods from Mauritania and other African countries. To this end, we will actively continue to encourage the United Nations Secretary General to seek the removal of artificial illegal obstacles that the United States and its allies maintain in the way of logistics and financing chains for the delivery of Russian fertilizers and food to world markets. That's a part of its package initiative, Lavrov said. So he's trying to say, the reason why you're not getting all these wonderful things from Russia for right now is because the United Nations and its allies have put these blockades. So you are supposed to just blame them. If the fertilizers get late or this other help that we are, the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia has limited in how, the movement of certain things. And so while they are trying to, of course, all this is just international relations here at play, with the African leaders having met the U.S. during that U.S. African Leaders Summit in December. It sort of awakened other interest as well. And now we see Russia has been on an offensive, especially after its invasion last year. And talking about tarnishing the good name, but Russia's, has always been controversial in some of the decisions it's been making. And so it has been on a charm offensive to try to especially endear itself in Africa in particular, which I'm not surprised because it's not just Russia. We've seen also China has been on an offensive, and they've been trying to also mend that or strengthen that relationship with the African leadership, as well as the next thing you know, I think EU will be having a summit with African leaders also next month, I believe. And then Japan also have a similar summit. So, hey, I guess we are the bride, and all these people, they must be seeing something good in us, of course, that they stand to benefit. But I guess we haven't discovered that good thing, yeah? That's why we allow them to just come here and run their agenda. And when they come, we don't have our own agenda. Because if you think that the Russian foreign minister will just be walking across the African countries just to tell them we're bringing you fertilizers and foodstuffs and hydrocarbon fuel and all this if they didn't stand to gain anything? No, it's because they have identified what they want. Because if you look at the countries that they go to, even when they're making all these labs, the countries that they choose to give priorities, just study their history in those countries and what those countries have, and then there lies your answer as to why this renewed interest on African continent is there from these other Western powers. So you can't blame Russia for these maneuvers it's making. The US is doing the same. China is doing the same. The only people here who perhaps needs to wake up is us in the continent, and we need to also have our own agendas when we're meeting with these people and say, fine, you're here and we hear what you're saying, but also this is how we choose to relate with you. This is what we want from this relationship, and this is how we would like for this relationship to be. But unfortunately, even when our leadership are attending these meetings and these summits, they go there without an agenda, They go there without an agenda. So the rest of the world and the Western country, or the country that has called on this meeting, they get to run their agenda, which is part of their foreign policy. And then the African leaders are sitting there cheering and clapping. And then you come back to this continent and you're helping those people implement their foreign policy. And you have forgotten about yours. Because that's what it's all about. When the U.S. calls the U.S., the African leaders, they sit them down and talks to them and hosts a dinner on their own in Washington there, and tells them this is how the U.S. intends to interact with Africa, and we have 50 billion that is set to be spread over Africa for 3 years, blah, 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 and this and that and that. You think the United States is being very philanthropic? No. That is part of their strategy to achieve their foreign policy. And now our leaders, who a lot of them, maybe a good number of them understand really how these things work, but a lot of them are really clueless. So they will sit there, they will listen up. Okay, so they come back to their country. So what did the United Nations say? Okay, this. So how do they say we partner with them in this way? So you find that you're helping the United States achieve its own foreign policy in your country, while you don't even think about this relationship with the United States, me as a head of state or me as the leader of this country, first of all, our relationship, there's great imbalance. So how can I work to make sure, as much as we're having this partnership, but my country also gets to benefit, I get to maximize on this relationship as even we explore and we push for our own foreign policy. They don't think about it like that. Yeah, and as Dr. Matanga will often say, they go there and, you know, they just buy perfumes and all these things, and they take selfies in the streets of New York or Washington or whatever. They sit in buses when they're attending these funerals, and then they come back here. Zero. They have zero. They have no notes to sit and to look at and say, okay, fine. So this was the meeting we attended. This is what was said. But how can we use this to benefit our people or to maximize on behalf of our people? Zero. And that is because a lot of times, even the kind of people they choose in these positions who go to negotiate, who accompany them to these meetings, are clueless about some of these things. You're supposed to carry people who really understand the international system, perhaps people who have even studied diplomacy or international relations or policy making or things like that, who really have a good understanding on how those people work up there. So when they go with you, as a head of state, you might not be equipped with knowledge in this field, but when you have people who have a good understanding, they will advise you as advisors. They will tell you, sir, I know that is what we've said there, but this is the approach that we should take as a country because this is where we stand to benefit. So you find that these leaders, they carry their own cronies, people who are clueless on issues, don't know nothing about policy making. They attend these meetings or these summits, and they come back with zero. You know, we just waste our money going and coming back, and at the end of the day, there's nothing we're showing for it. And that is the tragedy of the leaders here in Africa. Until we start doing things right and getting the right people on these important spaces, we will continue being played. It's going to be the game of chess, and we will keep losing here while they keep maximizing on our natural resources. They maximize on these relationships, the wonderful relationships they think we have. But at the end of the day, there's great imbalance and inequality in how even some of these things are done in a way that is detrimental. And then at the end of the day, their foreign policy affects how we make our decisions here, because now we have to dance to their tune, and what they want for us to even get that money that they've said they want to give us in the case of the United States, and the money that it has set aside to give to Africa for the next 3 years. Okay, so there's a lot. So we need to smarten up. It's about time, I think. We need to smarten up. It's not business as usual. And when you see all these people trooping back here in Africa, there's something they're seeing. I don't know if we are able to see that. I don't know if you're able to place a value on us enough to see and sit down and ask ourselves, why are they coming? And what are they looking for? What is it that we have that forces all these people to give us all this attention? And then after we realize that, we say, okay, fine, since they're the ones who are looking for us anyway, so now we have to set this agenda and we have to sit on that table as equals. Yes, because, that is what sovereignty demands. As long as you are a sovereign country, when Rwanda, as small as it is, and US, as big as it is, sits on the table, they're all equal. That is what sovereignty demands, regardless of the size of your country. But one is an equal partner and the other one is an equal partner. So you negotiate from that perspective. And that way, maybe you can benefit your people and maybe your foreign policy will start making sense to your own country. Okay? All right. I'll see you tomorrow, God willing. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's 3:45 to 4 p.m. here in Nairobi. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Thank you and bye-bye for now.